So I'm now going to introduce our guest, Clare Monnelly. Clare Monnelly is an actor and writer. Her first play, Charlie's a Klepto, was nominated for 2 Irish Times Theatre Awards, Best New Play and Best Actress, and the Stuart Parker New Playwright Bursary. Her second play, Minefield, premiered at the Dublin Fringe Festival in 2019 and was nominated for 3 Fringe Awards, Best Design, Fishamble New Writing Award, and the First Fortnight Award. Her third play, The Shed, is in development with Live and Dread Theatre Company and Pavilion Theatre, and she just completed the Lyric New Playwright programme, for which she wrote her 4th play, Funny Story. As an actor, Clare has worked with Druid, the Gate Theatre, the Abbey Theatre, and Live and Dread, amongst others, and was nominated for an Irish Times Theatre Award for Best Supporting Actress for her portrayal of Mary in Live and Dread's production of Tom Murphy's Baile Gon Gaire. On screen, she has worked with RTE, including on the comedy series Nowhere Fast, Sky One, including the comedy series Moone Boy, TG Cahar, Element, and many others. Clare's work has received support from Irish Theatre Institute, Access Arts Centre Ballymun, Dublin Fringe Festival, Dublin City Council, the Arts Council of Ireland, Tile Style, the Alliance Business to Arts Awards, Pavilion Theatre, Dunleary, Live and Dread Theatre Company, Drogheda Arts Centre, the Stuart Parker Trust, Fishamble New Theatre Company, and the Lyric Theatre Belfast. So now that I've read her highly impressive CV, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Clare Monnelly. Clare, if you want to stick on your camera and your... Hi.
Hi.
Excellent.
That is the closest I've come to preview nerves in a long time.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's brilliant to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
The reason, for many reasons why I wanted to have you on, is that at the Conservatoire, our graduates are going out to work in all kinds of things. It can be stage work, screen work. Because your career has straddled the two in such an interesting way, you've worked on kind of very notable TV shows, you've worked with most of the major companies in Ireland in terms of theatre, and you've also you've got the hustle side of it down as well. You produce a lot of your own work and you're writing as well. So we thought you were the best possible person to finish out this series because you're kind of giving a whole slice of the pie view of the industry.
Thank you.
So a question that we've been asking all of our participants so far, because it gives such a great flavor of what it's like to work in this crazy industry and particularly what it's like to enter into it, is pretty straightforward. So I'll start with that. What was your first year out when you graduated from the Creative School of Acting? What was your first year out of drama school like working in the industry?
I graduated from the Gaiety School in 2011, which is a long time ago now. I was lucky enough to be able to live at home with my folks in Dublin when I was training, and not everyone has that kind of option. I stayed living with them for a while because I was so poor. And then when I was lucky enough to sign with an agent. I signed with First Call Management off the back of our graduation play. And when I was leaving drama school, I was like, okay, like best case scenario, you'll get signed by an agent. There's a good chance that you won't. And either way, we'll just keep cracking on, keep hustling. But I was lucky enough to sign with them. And then it was the next thing. I wanted to be in rooms. And I remember talking to my pals about this and assuming or thinking like, you know, all we want now is to be auditioning for things. There's a good chance you won't land a job for a really long time, but you want to be in rooms, you want to be meeting people, you want to be making a good impression on people. And so that was the first thing that I suppose the leg up that getting an agent gives you is that they can get you into a room when nobody knows who you are. So I started auditioning for things. I was lucky enough to land my first theatre job with a company called Live and Dread, who are based out of the Rammer Theatre in Cavan. And I got that, I think, about 2 months after I graduated. So the first 2 months, it's kind of like falling off a cliff leaving drama school a little bit. And there's not really a way of preparing for it. You can be kind of prepared or you can think you're prepared, but it's just when you go from training like 40, 50 hours a week, doing what you love all the time, to just nothing. It's a really weird transition, because you get used to that kind of that work load that work ethic, all those things, the learning and the playing and the working. And not having work then is a really weird situation to be in. But it's going to be the case for at least a while, if unless you're super, super lucky. So those 2 months were kind of weird. I kind of pottered around and was on the dole and drank and stupid stuff. But got that gig and was over the moon, and did that job in September, October. We performed it in the Rammer Theatre for 2 weeks. And
what was
then,
the production, can I ask?
Oh, sorry, it was a play called Ride On by a playwright called Seamus O'Rourke, who's an incredible playwright and actor, extremely prolific, from Leitrim. So it was a brilliant experience. I got to be in a room with, immediately in a room with actors who I really admired, Eno Danderson and John O'Lahan, and it was just a really brilliant starting point, a really brilliant rehearsal room to be in. They were all really generous. I was absolutely terrified on my first day because I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. I knew I had the craft and I knew I had all the training and all that kind of stuff, but you do feel a little bit in the deep end on your first day. But everyone was lovely and it was a brilliant experience. And when that finished up, I fell off another cliff, and thought that it was a fluke and that I would never work again. And I also wanted to move out of home. So I was like, you can't live with your folks anymore. You have to be an adult. So I went and got a job as a waitress. I got a job in Wagabama in Dundrum, and all the time auditioning and meeting new people, getting to be in rooms with people, getting to hopefully make good first impressions, because we know they last, on casting directors, and by no means getting jobs at this point, but knowing that I would be remembered if I showed up on time and had my work done and was good at what I do. And then I was lucky enough a few weeks into getting that waitressing job to be cast in Moone Boy, which I knew was extremely lucky. I mean, all these things, obviously I was right for the part, but it was good timing. It was conscious as well that they had their names. They had Dio Kane, they had Peter MacDonald, and they had Chris O'Dowd, and so when it came to the kids, they didn't need famous people. So that was, all those things are part of the many, many things that have to come together for you to get a gig like that. And I was extremely lucky and knew how lucky I was. So I worked in Wagamama for a couple of months, and then in the January of 2012, we started shooting series 1 of Moone Boy, which was an unbelievable experience. The Gaiety School is a brilliant training ground, but it trains you nearly exclusively for stage work. And we had a week of screen training, but it was super quick and a bit of a skim across the top. So getting to work on Moone Boy was an incredible learning ground for me. Even just technically speaking, how different the two art ones are. It is like having two separate careers. So that was amazing. We shot for 8 weeks, and because I was one of the supporting lead cast, I was there nearly every day, and just got to soak up all of that knowledge and learn absolutely loads. And then that finished, and I moved out, and I'd gotten a place with my friends, and I was happy out, and I knew how well things were going, because you're looking at all your pals and everyone's careers are taking such different paths. So I knew how lucky I was. And then I didn't get another job for between shooting series 1 and shooting series 2. I don't think. So that was not a shock, because I knew it would happen, but I didn't know what to do with myself. And this was before I discovered that me not working is not good for my mental health. So instead of, I had a few bobs from Moone Boy, so it was okay for the rent for a while. And instead of just going and finding a job, like a regular job to tide me over, I think I was unemployed for 2 months before I realized that I was going to lose my mind. So I went back to work for Barclays Bank, who I'd worked for before I went to drama school. It took me back for a couple of months. in the knowledge that I'd be leaving again to shoot series 2 or whatever. But it was just something to, when you're so used to either drama school or rehearsing a play or performing a play or shooting something, and then it just stops. You need something to keep your mind active, to keep to keep paying the bills as well. You have to be able to pay the bills even when acting isn't paying the bills. So that was when I discovered that I had a need to be busy. And then I went back and shot series 2. Go on, Tanya.
No, I'm just going to say that's so interesting, because we've had a couple of guests on the series that have talked about the fact, I've been talking very honestly about the fact that there's no structure to a career as an actor, that you can have, as you said, like solid good gig, nothing, superb gig, no idea what's happening next. And Jonathan Shanky from Lisa Richards Agency talked very honestly about that. But one thing that we kind of haven't touched on is that it's not just the financial and career precarity that's quite that can be challenging to deal with. It's that as well, that mental health aspect I think is really important. Can you talk about how do you, in those periods where somebody hasn't hired you to do something, how do you keep yourself interested, stimulated, healthy, happy?
Well, yeah, I suppose when I left drama school and I just wanted to be a straight up jobbing actor, I consider myself uni talented. Like, that was the thing I could do. You give me your script, I do it really well. That's how this works. That's what I'll do. And so when I wasn't getting acting work, I would get a regular straight up job. I would just go back to work, either waitressing or bartending or in the bank or whatever it was, so that I could feel like a valuable member of society, and that I wouldn't lose my mind. And like, busy actors are better actors. My agent always says that, even if you're not busy acting, say if you have an audition, say that you get a few days or a week's notice for, if the audition is the only thing you do in that day, it becomes so important. It almost becomes too important. And you layer all this unnecessary pressure on yourself that is not only maybe the height of your day, but also of your week or potentially your month, because there are dry times, and that, I think, puts too much importance on that 10 minutes in that room. And I don't think I don't think you're at your best when you're sitting at home. If you have a 3 o'clock audition, you're sitting at home building up to it all day. I just don't think you're at your best. So I think, personally for me, I'm better when I'm busy. So when I auditioned for Nowhere Fast, I was temping in a quantity surveyors on Leeson Street or something, and I had to run out on my lunch hour and run down to the Central Hotel, do the recall with the producer and the director on Skype, and they wanted me to read off to somebody else, and I was like, yeah, cool, but I have to be back in 20 minutes to my job on Leeson Street. So it wasn't the be all and end all of my day. And obviously I wanted the job, but I didn't then go home and sit and think about every aspect of the audition for the whole rest of the day and wreck my own head about it. I also, when I leave an audition, I go straight to the nearest bin and throw the sides in it, because when I started out, I left drama school, because printing is expensive. So I'd print the sides for an audition, I'd do the audition, and then I'd keep them just in case. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's because they'll just be sitting there on your desk looking at you, reminding you of the job that you didn't get a recall for. So I go to the nearest bin and throw them in. That's kind of a superstition of mine now. But yeah, keeping busy. I suppose it took me a while to realise that not only did I want to be busy between paid acting gigs, but I also had all this creative energy that had nowhere to go. So it was all well and good going and working as a waitress or as a barmaid and everything, and that paid the bills, and that's great. But I had all this artistic energy that didn't have an outlet. And that's when I started writing, because it needed somewhere to go. And I've always been really honest about it as well. I started writing my first play, which was a one-woman play, Charlie's Klepto, out of frustration and necessity. I wasn't working as much as I would have liked to have been working. I wasn't being on as many stages as I would have liked to have been on. So I was like, well, if you're not going to put me on a stage, then I'll put myself on a stage. So it was the industry, really. I didn't set out to be a writer. I set out to just be working. Oh, it's being recorded, isn't it? Why did I do that? Anyway, so I wanted to be on stage, and at that particular moment, nobody was putting me on stage. So I started writing. And then, as well as having a creative outlet and discovering a new skill that you didn't know you had, and all those things, all the amazing things that come along with diversifying within your career, it also meant that at the end of the gig, I didn't have to fall off that cliff anymore.
Okay.
On a Saturday night, on the last night of a performance of a play, I knew that on Monday morning I will get up and I will go back to my laptop, or I will go back to a development room, or I would go back to the rest of my career, instead of the end of every gig feeling like it would be the end of every gig ever, and that the rest of them are all a fluke and that you'll never work again, because that's it can feel like that. And I thought that would go away. But I worked with Ingrid Craigie on a play in the Gate a couple of years ago, and I remember talking to my best pal, Caoimhe O'Malley, who was in the play as well, coming up to the last week of performance, and it had been a really long summer gig. It was a really brilliant job, and coming up to the end of it, we were getting that anxiety again about what would be next and everything, and we were talking about that in the dressing room, and Ingrid turned around and went, "God, yeah." And I was like, "What? You're Ingrid Craigie? This never goes away." It never goes away. So I think acceptance of knowing that that your job will be an absolute roller coaster in every sense of the word, and you have to be able to roll with that.
Yeah, but it sounds like you've kind of got a great structure for yourself now of knowing kind of financially, practically, all right, I need, a friend of mine who's an actor calls it survival work, like working in the bank, working in a temp. That kind of keeps the spine of kind of staying fed, staying alive, and being able to live going. But I love the fact that you've also created a creative work structure for yourself, that you've got that kind of creative outlet, but also that it's still a very practical career tool for you, that this is you creating your own opportunities as well as having your own creative work.
Absolutely. And even alongside the acting work, my writing work has grown and expanded in a way that I'm kind of always keeping it ticking over. So even when I have either a screen gig or a stage gig, or I'm in rehearsals or I'm in performance, I'll always be tipping away at it as well, so that it doesn't fall off the cliff entirely, and then I have to pick it all back up. Like it's kind of and as artists as well, I think I remember when I'm married to an actor. So when I started seeing him, and I was just straight out, I was really soon out of drama school, and I just getting used to the whole jobbing actor life, and he would say, like, "Oh, I'm just doing some work," even if he was between jobs. I didn't know what that meant. I was like, "What work?" Because I like to be proactive. I like to work hard. I'm a grafter. I want to be busy. But between my first few jobbing actor jobs, I didn't know what that was that I could be doing. I felt really at a loose end. I was like, I really want to give myself and my career the best chance I can. I'm more than happy to work to progress. But when you finish a gig, you just kind of don't know what that is that you can be doing, because it's kind of ephemeral. And like, do I go to the pub after the play to talk to actors, or does that help, or does it not? Or I wanted it to be work-based. So when he used to say, "Oh, I'm doing a bit of work," or whatever, I never knew what that meant. And then when I started picking up development work, or when I started writing, really, when I found that other outlet, I realized that I could be an artist in more than one sense of the word, and I could always be. And even during a weird time like this, I've never been more glad of that, because I have had work to be getting on with. I have had things to be doing, so that I didn't feel like, obviously my acting career more or less stopped dead like the rest of the world did, but it didn't feel like my career in its entirety had to stop dead, because there was things I could be doing and skills I could be developing and working on and learning always, because you're always learning and you're always getting better, and that will never not be the case in this job. I think it's why it makes it so interesting and terrifying.
Interesting and terrifying, such a horribly perfect synopsis of the career. I want to come back later to talk about your writing work, but because we have you here, and because you've worked on Moone Boy, which so many of us would have seen and loved, I thought it was a great opportunity to just kind of ask a question from glorious ignorance and say, I have no idea what happens to put a TV show of that scale on screen. Can you, for the sake of us mere mortals, talk us through, from audition to shooting to post-production, what it's actually like being a working actor on a big TV show?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't know either. I didn't have a clue. And so I suppose straight out the gate, I got the script to read for the audition. And as it happens with Moone Boy, I got all 6 scripts, which is really unusual. Normally, if you're auditioning for a TV series, you might get one episode to give you context. You don't even always get that, unfortunately. You might get just a synopsis or something to give you the contents and context and the pitch and the tone of the thing. But as it happens with Moone Boy, I got all 6 scripts, so I got to sit down and read the entire series. Which you have, like, this is going to sound potentially a given, but like, read everything you get, like everything that they give you, read it, because it's expected of you, first of all, but it gives you such, the more you get, the better audition you're going to do, the more context you have, the more of an idea you have what the tone of everything is, what they're looking for. So I got to read all 6 episodes, and it was the first time, obviously I hadn't been out that long, but it was the first script that I'd ever read where I was laughing out loud at the lines. And so initially I was like, this is it's a Sky One show, it's a big deal, you've never set foot on a set before. I did a short film when I was like 11 or something. As a grown adult actor, you've never worked on screen before. The chance of you getting this are slim to none. However, it was a casting director I hadn't met before. The sides I got, the scenes I got to prepare were just so good that I was like, this is a brilliant opportunity even to be in that room and to read for this new casting director, Amy Rowan, who you haven't gotten to meet before. So I suppose at the point of my career where that was my end game, which is actually really nice. I think Bryan Cranston says that you should look at auditions as your job for that day. And then when you leave the room, your job for that day is done, and so you can just forget about it. So I went and did the audition, and in the first I read opposite the casting director, which was fine, but then there was somebody writing out.
Yes. Just this again, I want to ask the dumbest questions possible. Where was the audition? Where do they hold
the audition? At the time, the audition was in Film Base, which is no longer a thing, but it's there on Curve Lane in Temple Bar. So the audition was there. It was in just one of their rooms that they had there with Amy Rowan, the casting director. So I read opposite her, and I was really happy with what I did. And then she asked me to stay and read opposite the next actor who was coming in, who was Marty Ray.
Oh.
Who is a pal of mine now, but at the time I was like, Marty Ray, oh my God. Don't ever tell him I said that. But I was like, oh my God.
Being recorded.
Marty, being recorded. But I was like, oh my God, I get to read up from Marty Ray. So when I read opposite Marty and I left, and even that in itself, like, I remember calling my pal to be like, I just read opposite Marty Ray in an audition. This is wild. So I was really happy with it, but I certainly had no great expectations of it. And then I was asked to go and recall, and I was told that in the recall, Declan Lowney, the director who directed Father Ted and has worked with Beyonce, was going to be there, as was Chris O'Dowd. So I was like, this is mad. This is not your regular auditions. This is great crack. And so when I went for the recall, I was just really excited about that. And I thought it went really well. I was really happy with what I did. And if nothing else, I could tell my grandchildren that I auditioned for Declan Lowney and Chris O'Dowd. And that was kind of where I was at. Obviously, there's a little part of your mind that goes to the place of what if, but it just felt like way beyond me or where I was in my career. And then I was doing a shift in Wagamama, and I had my phone in my apron, which was against the rules. And it rang, and it was my agent. And I just ran out the front door, again, against the rules. I ran out the front door, I ran across, and it was her telling me that I had an offer for the part. And I'll never forget it, because it is that thing of like, it is as brilliant. And people say that when it's an actor most happy, and it's the 5 minutes after you get a job, and then you immediately start worrying about that job. But I had a good 20 minutes of just pure utter joy at the thought that I had landed that gig. And so that was great. I had to hand in my notice in Wagamama, having just started working there, but they were pretty cool about it. And then, so the process of the shoot for series 1 was 8 weeks in total, if I remember rightly. We had the benefit of a week's rehearsals, which isn't always the case with screen work. I know if you're a lead in a series or a movie, they would certainly try and work in some rehearsal time with the director, but it's by no means a given. I suppose with Moone Boy, the focus was so much on our young co-stars that they wanted to create the best possible atmosphere for them to excel, which they obviously absolutely did. So there was a whole week out in Ardmore of costume fittings and rehearsals around the table, and table reads and that kind of stuff. I was utterly clueless about what being on a set would be like. The week before I started work on the show, I sat down with my other half and we went to the credits of a film, and I asked him what every person's job was, like what a gaffer did, why are there 3 assistant directors. I was completely clueless. But that was it was to make me feel like I wasn't walking into a totally alien experience, and it did. It helped. When I got there, I could figure things out a little bit better. So we had that week's rehearsals, and we were around the table a lot of the time reading the script, and the kids would ask these like ostensibly silly questions, and I'd be like, "Oh, so funny," because I didn't know either. So like what's a mark? What's a sausage? What are lens sizes? All this stuff that I didn't have a clue about. But over the course of the 8 weeks, I was on set enough that I got to ask stupid questions. First of all, I got to work with some of the most incredible actors and crew you could wish to be on a set with, and I got to learn an unbelievable amount. It was a brilliant experience, and a brilliant script. Like, you don't have to do anything with writing that good except get out of the way of it. And I got to just learn. I was just learning the whole time, and not only from the older actors and the crew, but the younger actors who were so completely fearless and so brilliantly cast, and they were just the crack. It was an incredible. The whole 3 series were unforgettable, and it's something I'm really proud of.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
And again, from a place of blissful ignorance, what does an average day on set look like? Like what hours are involved? What happens when you're not in front of a camera? Everything.
Yeah. It really is like having 2 completely separate careers, working on stage and working on screen. That was really apparent to me when I started filming series 1. I had that wonderful experience in the rehearsal room with Live and Dread, so I knew what a rehearsal period felt like, what text felt like, what performance felt like, how previews and opening night, all that stuff. I had that wonderful first professional stage experience, and this was like a completely different world. So an average day, you get picked up in the morning, 5:30, 6:30 a.m. Brought to set. You have a bit of breakfast. You go to makeup, and they make you look respectable. You get into your costume, and then you wait. You wait in your trailer or your dressing room or whatever it is, depending on the size of the production. There's a lot of waiting. There's a whole lot of waiting. And it can feel really calm in those moments. And then when you get brought to set, it's like, go. And it took me, I suppose the biggest adjustment for me was when you're in a rehearsal room, it's a constant conversation between yourself and the director and your fellow actors. There's a lot of time not enough time oftentimes, but there is time to try things and to fail and to go again and to figure things out together. When you're on set, you're a much smaller part of a much larger machine. There's no time for you to really indulge in too much questioning or too much. They just ideally want you to get it right now, please, first time if possible. And so I suppose that can feel like a lot of pressure, but I actually really thrived on it in the sense that, and I've done a decent amount of both stage and screen now, enough I think to say that there is no comparable terror to the terror of standing backstage before the preview, your first preview of a new play. Nothing will ever compare to that. I, to this day, will always question my choice of career in that moment, standing backstage before the preview of a new play, particularly if it's a play you've written for yourself and it's 75 minutes long and you're on your own. Like big life questions happening. There's no comparable pressure for me on a set. And it's simply down to the fact that if you mess it up, you can do it again. There's no live audience there watching your every move and your every facial tick. Obviously, ideally, you will get it right and you will move on. Sorry, I went on tangent there. The biggest thing it took me a while to get my head around was that if nobody tells you it's good and you move on, it was good, because they wouldn't have moved on if it wasn't. And I think my partner told me that early on as well. He's like, people won't be talking to you and discussing things with you in the same way as they would in a rehearsal room, because everyone is so busy doing their job that they fully trust and are confident in the fact that you can do yours. Like obviously we're getting direction and stuff, but basically if what you're doing is great, then maybe the director won't talk to you at all and they'll just call scene complete and then move on. I think I was desperately in need of someone to tell me that I was doing it right. And no one has time to do that on a set. Gotcha. Like no one. I think maybe 3 weeks in, the DOP or somebody was like, oh, great. And I nearly cried because I was so desperately in need of the reassurance that I was, because I suppose there's always that thing in you where where you're feeling that everyone's looking at you going, oh God, what are we thinking? But no, I think once you accept the fact that people aren't going to move on to the next thing unless they're happy with what they've gotten, just aren't necessarily going to tell you that. Like on my very first day, not my very first day, one of my first days, it was one of my biggest first scenes, I suppose, where it was very much me. And we were filming in a church out in Wicklow, and they shot the other side of it. So it was myself and Ronan Raftery. It was one of our first scenes together. He played the choir master that ended up marrying. So first scene, big scene with him, and they shot his side of it first, which meant, I was dirty on camera. The camera was behind me shooting Ronan's face. And then we wrapped for the day. So I was like, oh, maybe this whole scene is just going to be on his face. And then I got the call sheet for like a week later, and it was my side. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know that. I literally didn't. I was acting my absolute arse off when I wasn't even being seen, which is completely fine, by the way, because there's nothing worse than somebody who knows they aren't on camera and then just doesn't perform at all, because you have to be there for your fellow actor. But it took a long time to learn that. It also took a long time to learn that when you're mic'd, you can always be heard. So on that day, when I did that first big scene, it was the next time when they came back to shoot my side of it. And I was a little bit anxious about it. It was a big scene, it was my first big scene. And on the first take, I just totally dried. I just got halfway through the scene and I just totally dried, and I had to go, no, sorry, and turn around and walk back to my mark. But on the way back to my mark, I gave myself a little pep talk. Come on, Claire. Come on. You have this. You can do this. Don't be so ridiculous. Come on, you know these lines. But like Declan and Chris were listening to me on their cans. So they heard my little pep talk to myself. So don't talk to people when you're mic'd.
That could have been a lot worse, in fairness.
It could have been an awful lot worse, yeah. But yeah, I learned an unbelievable amount in quite a short time. It was a real it was a masterclass really for screen acting.
When we were chatting in advance of this, I think my favorite story that you told me about being on set was the cup of tea story, in terms of understanding just how big this kind of production is.
I think we talked a lot about the fact that as far as I'm concerned, the way to make a career doing what it is that we do is to work really, really hard and be sound. And so I was And that's always been how I felt about it. So I was trying really hard to work really, really hard and be really, really sound. And because I didn't really understand how a set worked, the third AD would always like ask me if I wanted a cup of tea and would be bringing me a cup of tea. And I felt really weird and a bit bad about this, because I was like, I'm perfectly capable of getting my own tea. I feel like I'm being waited on. It's a bit odd. And I kept going and getting my own. And about 3 weeks in, she was like, you're not helping me. If you spill tea on yourself, we all have to stop working. Stop getting your own tea. So it wasn't that you were like waiting on me hand and foot. It was that I was basically not trusted to get my own tea without scalding myself. But it's really good to learn these things, because then you can know when you are and aren't stepping on somebody's toes in terms of what it is that their job remit is. And also, like, I think I would have been terrified to ask if I had been a day player on my first ever screen job. That's really tough. And I think I'm really conscious now when I meet, if I'm a day player on a set, or if I'm a lead on a set and a day player comes in, I'm really conscious to try and make them, because it can feel like you're walking into a family reunion that you're not a part of, I think. Because sets do become like families, and they do gel really quickly. And if you're only in for a day or two, it can be really tough. It can also feel like it's not okay to ask questions, because, you know, again, time is money and all that kind of stuff. But I think, like, I never ever met a crew member who wouldn't be more than happy to discuss with you what it is they do. I'm not in the middle of a take, but like, if you're, you know, that was what I did. I would go around to the guys and chat to them about what it is they did and what, you know, what their purpose on the set was. And that was totally invaluable to learn all that about the mechanism of a working set.
I have to say, as a lecturer, it is deeply satisfying to me that the message I'm taking away from this, and that I hope all the students are taking away, is do your homework, do your research, do the reading.
Oh, 100, do the reading, yeah, 100%, and be on time.
That's also a great message.
Yeah.
So after you'd finished your on-set work, was there anything, any post-production work that you got called in for, or anything else you had to do on behalf of that TV show before it went on air?
Yeah. So in terms of the actors on, when it comes to screen work, sometimes there'll be reshoots or pickups if they've gotten into the edit and realised there's something that they're missing or that they didn't quite catch. I don't think we ever had that with Moone Boy. Actually, I think they were pretty all over it. But what you will more than likely be called in to do is something called ADR. I'm not going to remember what that stands for, but it's that's terrible. I should have looked that up. But basically, it's when you go into a sound studio and you record lines or sounds or things that got missed on the shoot. So there were, you know, if you're doing work outside and the mic didn't pick something up, or if they've realised that they're missing a bit of a story point or a bit of something that they want to layer in on top of the sound design, then you'll be called in to do that. That's closer. That's once, and that's really nice actually, because that'll be at a point where a rough edit has been put together. And so generally speaking, it's the first time you get to see anything. So it was the first time for me ever seeing myself on screen really in any serious way. So that was kind of brilliant. And I suppose it kind of took the edge off then going to a big, huge premiere where, you know, there's lots of people in the room watching you. It just took that edge off a little bit, that I got to see myself and know that I hadn't made an entire show of myself altogether. That was nice.
Okay, so you had so a little bit of sound and pickups. Was there anything else, or was like the next thing just sitting down in front of the telly? And
yeah, no, and it's funny, like then you just don't hear anything ever again until they need you for like a media appearance, because like oftentimes, and it's not out of any badness or anything. Just there's so many different departments of people dealing with things when it comes to a show like that or whatever, like or any big production like that. Like oftentimes they'll be re-showing it somewhere. I never know anything like that. They're re-showing it or anything like that. But yeah, basically next time you'll hear is when there's a finished product ready to go. And oftentimes there'll be maybe like a cast and crew screening of a couple of episodes, or if it's the feature of the feature, so that you get to get a sneak peek of it before it goes out there into the world. But yeah, essentially as soon as you leave that set, your work there is done, and it's down to all the incredible post-production people can make you look as good as they possibly can. But that's the point at which, like, and that's what partner Erin said to me, which was a really good piece of advice actually, was that as soon as someone shouts scene complete, then you forget about that then, and you move on. Because that's done. That's that in the can, and that's, you've done your work, and that's all you can do. And whatever way they choose to edit or put you together is beyond your control.
It's fascinating as well to think the way you describe it. It just sounds like such a very different kind of ending, because whilst there's all kinds of stress, and as you say, and there's no pressure like being on stage in front of a live audience, but there's that wonderful sense of closure at the end of audience and performers in that curtain call with the applause together, being like, yes, we are complete, we did this together. You're welcome, thank you. The end of a film set like, bye then, sounds quite anticlimactic.
100%. And I think I struggle with that all three series, is that like on your and for the most part, what the equivalent on a set is that on your last day, at the end of your last scene, you'll get a round of applause from the rest of the cast and the crew, which is a nice thing. But I kept waiting for, I suppose, in one way it's a really great thing about screen work for me, and in another way it's kind of like sad, and I think it's why I would love to maintain a healthy balance of both in my career if possible, is that you never get that. And I suppose, like, people say that the feeling an actor gets on an opening night or a preview is similar to your body going into shock during a car crash, which probably isn't that good for you, really. But it's obviously, there's something in it that makes us keep going back and back again and again. And there is never that same level of heightened terror / elation, I suppose, or relief. But it is so, at the same time, it's an incredibly enjoyable thing to, and I never look back at myself on set. Oftentimes an actor will go behind the screen to rewatch a take to see it, and I never do that. I trust that the people who are watching it know what they want from me, and if they want something different, they can tell me. And also, my eyebrows have a mind of their own, and if I watched it back, I would just be crippled by the state of my eyebrows. So I don't watch it back. So there is something really magical about seeing the finished product then, and having worked on a set, having a better understanding of just how much work went into like that, your performance. And even though in the wider world, I think performances are given like a much larger slice of the kind of praise pie, but you know yourself from being on a set that your performance is just one tiny part of a huge, huge machine, and so many people's talents and efforts and work went into making it look how it looks at the end of the day. Because I've shot self-tapes and things on my phone, and they don't look good and they don't sound good. It takes an awful lot of people to make TV and film look as beautiful as it does.
I'd love to know, kind of for something completely different, you've talked a little about your writing, and so your first play, Charlie Was a Klepto, which was nominated for many awards, and you talked about how that kind of came out of your need for creative autonomy and to tell your own story. Work, okay. To create work.
Let's be real.
And do correct me if I get this wrong, but just for the sake of those who haven't seen it, Charlie Is a Klepto is a one-woman show which talks about a woman who is a recovering kleptomaniac, is that fair to say? Who is, we meet her at a moment of anxiety in her life where she's waiting on some very important news. And the story is kind of her odyssey across Dublin in a way, and she meets all these fascinating characters all played by you, and there's elements of kind of mythology kind of underlying this kind of like very recognizable kind of Dublin landscape. And it's a beautiful piece, and you've written it and performed it and toured it pretty much the length and breadth of the country, I think, at this point. So that's what it became. Let's talk about that first. When did you first hear Charlie's voice and think, oh, this is a play, and this is a play that I could write, and this is a play that I could perform?
Like I said, I've always been very honest about the fact that the initial impetus to write Charlie definitely came from a place of frustration. And the first time I heard her voice in my head really clearly was sitting in the Dole office. which unfortunately you're all gonna know real well in your future, one way or another. And I suppose there's a sense of helplessness when you sit there and you're kind of laying out your life for somebody in the hope that they'll help you get by in this slightly unbusy patch. I think it's a really vulnerable way to be and to feel, especially if you're trying to explain what being a freelance actor is, because not everyone can get their heads around that. So that's the first initial impetus I had to write her. I heard her voice in my head, and when I started writing her story, it was very much from the perspective of somebody sitting in the dole office waiting to see if they would get their dole. And then a friend read bits and pieces of little things, little chunks of story or memory, at least. It was very much a memory play to begin with, that I'd written down. And he was like, there's no stakes. She's waiting to get her dole. What are the stakes? And we all know from reading and seeing plays that the stakes are so integral. Like, why today? Why are we meeting these characters today? Why is this play happening today of all days? What is different about today? And so I thought the stakes would be significantly higher if she was in fact waiting to hear if she would get her baby back. So this character is a young single mother who's had a rough start to her motherhood, and unfortunately the social has decided to take her baby away from her for a 3-month period of time, during which she is allowed, or at least expected, to get her life back on track in some way, to get a job, to get a flat, to sort herself out, and to see if she's in a position to maybe take him back and really start being a mother again. So she's done all that. At the point at which we meet her is the day before she finds out whether she's going to get him back or not. She's gotten the job, she's gotten the flat, she's gotten her life back together. But in the 24-hour period / 75 minutes that we spend with her, everything obviously goes a bit awry, and her life is kind of thrown up into disarray again. So I started writing it, like I said, her voice was really, really clear in my head. So I started writing these memories from her childhood. And that was the bulk of the original writing. Basically, it was a 20-minute piece that I performed in the Collaboration Festival in Smock Alley, and in the Cornwall Theatre in Carrigallen as well, as a warm-up for Seamus O'Rourke. But I performed that 20-minute piece, and it was essentially her sitting in this social services office, waiting to have this meeting, and kind of telling these memories from her childhood, kind of as a way of explaining how she ended up where she is. So I did that 20-minute piece, and the response was really great. And then I got acting work, and it fell by the wayside. I did nothing more with it for a while. Aisling O'Brien in Fringe, and Ruth McGowan in Fringe. Aisling is now a freelancer. Ruth McGowan now runs the festival. At the time, she was a literary manager at Fringe, or programming manager. They asked me late one night in some pub somewhere if I was going to do anything more with it, because I kind of had let it. I'd done that 20-minute performance, and I was like, wow, that was terrifying. I'll leave that be for a while. They asked me what I was going to do with it. And they offered me up the cell in Fringe Lab, which is a small room in Fringe Lab where artists can go to write. They can get a couple of weeks in this room to write. And I was about to go in and do Big Maggie with Druid in the Gaiety Theatre. We were doing this wonderful 6-week run of Big Maggie. And I was like, well, I've no excuse now. I have my days free. I'm in Dublin. I'm not on tour. I can go and spend a week in the cell working on this play that I've kind of let slide for a while. So I did that. I went and wrote more. And again, it was all this memory stuff that I was writing. And I sent it to my friend Lee Coffey, who's a wonderful playwright, and for him to read and to give me some advice on how to expand it into a full-length play. And Lee very kindly, very gently told me that there's no story. Nothing's happening right now. There are no stakes. Where is she? Why are we meeting her? Why today? And so I knew I had all this, like, her voice was really strong. Her character was really clear. I knew exactly who she was and where she came from, but I needed a narrative arc to get an audience really engaged with her and on her side right now in this very moment. So I applied for a bursary from the Access Theatre in Ballymun to spend a week working on the play with my now husband, as a dramaturg and director. So we spent a week in Axis, and basically it was me like banging out this narrative arc that would surround or give life to these memories, I suppose, and him being like, why though, for the whole week. It was exhausting.
How romantic.
But, yeah, it was great. But over the course of that week, we managed to map out this narrative arc that would be the spine of this play. And at the end of the week, we had a short reading of an excerpt of the play for locals, for some pals, for some colleagues, and for Niamh McClure, who works in Axis. And at the end of the reading, which I think, like, somewhere within me, I wanted this to happen, but I thought it was way too good to be true. Niamh sat down with myself and Erin and was like, I want to produce that play. Which was like the absolute dream, because I have no producing skills. I didn't want to be a producer. I had no intention of producing a show. But I knew I could write this play, and I knew I could perform her. And so they commissioned me to finish writing it. I spent that money on my wedding, so I had to finish writing it. And then I went and met her and Mark, and all of a sudden they had dates in the diary for this play that was happening in the Axis in May of 2017, which at this point was like 6 months away.
Just for the sake of those who don't know. Sorry, just for the sake of those who don't know. So this is Niamh McClure, who's the programme manager at Axis Arts Centre Ballymun, and Mark O'Brien, who's the artistic director in Axis.
Sorry, I should have said. So I think I wanted to be busy. I wanted to be writing. I wanted to be feeling like I was doing something to further my career. I had not actually really thought of the reality of performing a 75-minute one-woman play on my own, for an actual audience of human beings. But when actors were so enthusiastic about it and loved it so much and supported it so strongly, I didn't have a choice. And so we did it. We performed it. We did a week in the Axis, and we did a small kind of satellite 5-venue tour of venues you can drive to without having to stay the night. So Drogheda, Portlaoise, Mermaid and Bray, Driocht and Blanche, and I'm forgetting one.
Civic?
Blip. No, we didn't go to Civic the first time. I forget. Anyway, so I did it for 2 weeks. I performed it 10 times over 2 weeks. And then I thought I might die. It was absolutely the most terrifying experience of my entire life, bar none. But it was also unbelievable. It was an unbelievable sense of achievement. Like, I'm always terrified going on stage for a preview, but when you're out there performing a play that you've written on your own, that your husband directed, there's really no one else to blame but you if it doesn't work. But it did. It really did. It really connected with people, and it went down really well. And the following spring, I suppose, we were nominated for the 2 Irish Dance Theatre Awards, and then in spring of 2019 we got to take it on a national tour. So it really was. It opened like a whole new career path for me, a whole new outlet for my creative energy, and also not only that, like, obviously I started out writing it because I wanted to be working, but once I got into the process of actually writing a play, it became way more than that. There was a need and a drive and a necessity to tell this story and to do it justice, and not do anything by halves. Like, I had to be the best it could possibly be, because I just got so attached to this fictional girl. And then I didn't know what to do after it, but I knew you have so little control over your life as a jobbing actor, so little control. It's heartbreaking, and I'm a control freak, and it just doesn't make sense. And what beginning to write gave me was this semblance of a sense of a control over my career, my trajectory, my future didn't lie solely in the hands of other people anymore. I had this drive and this ownership over the art that I was capable now of making, without somebody just knowing that I'm right for a part. And because that's, at the end of the day, you go into an audition and you can do the best audition in the history of the world, and you just mightn't be what they envisaged for that part. And like 99% of the time, that's going to be the reason. It's not a comment on your talent or your ability. It's just whatever the directors and producers have in their heads. And that is just way too much like luck and chance for my liking.
Mm-hmm.
So getting into the making side of things just gave me a semblance of control over things. And then I just haven't stopped doing it since. It's an addiction, unhealthy addiction.
It seems like it's a pretty healthy addiction, as addictions go. I find it fascinating because you talked so engagingly about the fact that writing gave you so much, that it gave you, as well as kind of the very practical thing of like a structure when your job wasn't putting structure on your life, that it also gave you this kind of creativity and this opportunity. But one thing I want to kind of chat to you a bit more about is that it also sounds like you were really smart about finding supports for opportunity. You were very lucky that you happened to have an excellent dramaturg and director to hand in the form of...
In my house.
In my house, there is one, which is, not all of us are that
lucky.
And
he can't say no.
but like, being glib, but also that is amazing that you had a partner who you trusted, particularly on that first piece of writing, and for it to be a one-person show, which is quite vulnerable. And you said very not offhandedly, but you mentioned that, you know, you applied for a bursary at Axis, which sounds like you were being very canny about, all right, I have this potential, I have this thing I want to pursue. Where are the supports that can help me pursue it? How did you come across the Axis bursary?
I'd love to think that I was super savvy and super canny. I think I am now. I definitely wasn't at the time. And again, like so much of our career, a lot of it was like luck and timing and finding amazing people kind of almost by chance. So obviously I work very closely with my husband there, and who was always going to be my sounding board for things anyway. So it just made sense that he's an incredible artist in his own right. And I really, really admire and respect the way he works and his work ethic and all those things. So it was a no-brainer that I would want to work with him. When it came to Axis, I had this nugget of a thing, this like idea, this potential of a play, and I didn't really know how to. Look, I knew I didn't want to be a producer. I mean, it was one thing to branch, and look, I've since done it, but not by choice. But it was one thing to branch out from being an actor to being a writer, but I knew I didn't have the requisite skills to produce a play, or I wouldn't even know where to begin. And it wasn't that the bursary in Axis was a guaranteed path to that. It's just I knew I needed support, and I knew I needed to be surrounded by people who knew what they were doing on their end of things. And I knew it would be the beginning of a conversation. And that's kind of all I expected from that week, was that we would be paid to be there for a week, which is really important. #paid the artist. And we also will get to start a conversation with a venue who I knew by reputation are incredibly supportive of artists, of work, and go out of their way at every possible turn to produce work within the remit of what their venue can do. So I knew Neve from when we were in college at the same time. So I knew like how passionate she was about art. I had met Mark once or twice. I knew he was the same. So the beginning of that conversation just happened really naturally. Ballymun was the perfect home for Charlie. Charlie is, I think the more specific you are about your writing, your narrative, your character, your story, the more specific you are, the more universal that it can end up being. Charlie is a Dublin character through and through, but we've travelled the country with her and she's resonated with everybody that we've shown her to. But I did know that Axis would be a perfect home for her to begin with. So that conversation happened really naturally then, and it moved on really naturally, and it was a brilliant beginning of a relationship that still exists to this day. Beyond that, then I had to get so actually produced Charlie, like out of obviously as well, it was a show that they could feasibly produce because it was a one-woman show with a beautiful lighting design by Susie Cummins, and that was essentially it. So in terms of feasibility, even for touring and stuff, it's a savvy offering, basically. It's not a six-hander with a big set that needs to be vanned around the place. So it was a smart move, unbeknownst to myself, I suppose. When it comes to the people I've gathered around me since in terms of support, that's graft in terms of keeping your ear to the ground about bursaries and support, and following the Irish Theatre Institute on all their social media, and keeping in touch with other artists who are in the same boat as you, keeping an eye on the Arts Council bursaries and their different offerings that they have, applying for everything under the sun that remotely applies to you, in terms of the work that you want to make. The arts doesn't have even remotely near the kind of funding that it should have in this country. It's diabolically bad. But what it does have is incredible people working in it. Incredible venue managers, incredible advocates for artists, incredible people who want to support and nurture the next generation of artists in this country, so that the whole thing doesn't just collapse on itself. So there are definitely opportunities out there. There mightn't always be a whole lot of money, but there's certainly people who will happily provide space or mentorship or advice or just have a coffee with you. Like, I think it was the year that I did Charlie that I just decided to start asking for things. And honestly, I've yet to be told no. That's not to say I haven't not gotten jobs and not gotten bursaries and stuff. I absolutely been told no a load of times. But when it comes down to the generosity of other artists, Sonia Kelly, can I meet you for a coffee? Like, Jane Daly, can you give me some advice on this thing? Sonia Kelly's a playwright. Jane Daly works in the Irish Theatre Institute. People are so generous with their time and their experience and their knowledge. And I'm even seeing it, and it was so generously passed on to me that I still feel like a baby artist, but I'm not anymore. I'm nearly doing it 10 years. So I now get the opportunity sometimes to meet an actor or meet a writer or give somebody some advice about producing their own work or even doing something like this. That's the bedrock of what keeps our industry going, especially at a time like this. That's why we will survive something like this, because the people who work in the industry and their utter generosity with their time and their knowledge, that's invaluable. But what that takes on your part is graft, is seeking people out, is putting the work in all day, every day, so that when you do ask for that coffee, people don't even hesitate to say yes, because they've seen you grafting, like hustling, really hustling.
And as you said earlier, one of the best things you can do in any romance industry is work hard and be sound.
Be sound, because that doesn't go unnoticed. Like, even before I left drama school, the Paul McIntyre gave me my first ever job. I auditioned for that part. I was right for it. I was good. Before he offered me that part, he rang two people who worked with me in the Gaelic School of Acting to ask about me. Not to ask about my talent, to ask about me as a human. That happens all the time. It's a really small town. It's a really small industry. I know it can feel like, and I'm conscious, I'm trying to remember how it felt as a graduate. It can feel massive and scary and like cliquey or unattainable and all of those things. But once you, like, work breeds work, and work recognizes work. Like, you recognize a hustler when you see one, somebody who's, and it's not about going to pubs and drinking with the right people or any of that stuff. It's the work. The work will always speak for itself. And like, everybody who is still doing this, either 10, 20, 30 years on from when they started, know the score, and they'll recognize a grafter when they see one, and they'll want to support that and give it all the help they can.
Yeah. I love that one of the through lines for this webinar series as a whole has been that kind of everyone saying like, yeah, no, you put in the work and don't be a dick.
Absolutely. It's just, it really is. It's that simple. If you were to narrow it down to a soundbite, it's, yeah, work really hard, don't be a dick.
And on that magical note, thank you so much, because that was fantastic. Because I mean, I really only asked you 3 questions, and really about, you know, what was your first year like, working on a TV show, discuss, and so you also now have an impressive playwriting career. But through you talking about that, it's such a wonderful insight into kind of what a career can look like, how the different jobs look, and just kind of what's involved in keeping yourself sane, healthy, excited, stimulated, and surrounded by the kind of people and work that you want to do. So thank you so much for that.
Pleasure.
I think we've had quite enough of me. So what I'd like to do now is open it up to people if they have questions. Now, for those of you who have joined us before, the way we normally work this is TU Dublin BA and Drama Performance students get first dibs on asking questions, just because we do this for you. So if any students have a question, if you want to either click the raise hand button in the participants window in chat, or if you just want to type ask question or hands up in the chat box, I'll call on you and I'll ask you to maybe turn on your microphone and turn on your camera if you feel like showing your face. So do we have
the awkward part of the post-show discussion where they go, any questions? And everyone goes.
Or even worse, like the hand goes up immediately, and when you call them, you get, this is really more of a comment than a question. Those words send a chill down my spine every time. All right. So we don't have any questions from students just yet. So no, I'm wrong. Matthew Nolan in to save the day. All right, we've one of our second years, Matthew Nolan. Matthew, if you want to stick on your camera and your microphone and ask Claire your question.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, Matthew.
Just want to say quickly, thank you very much for being here. It's been so insightful and it's been great. So I just want to ask really quickly, because you talked about how you wouldn't dedicate like a whole day to prepare like an audition because it's unhealthy, like if you're dedicating your whole kind of day to that. I was just wondering, how would you best prepare for an audition, and is there a difference between how you prepare for a stage audition versus a screen audition?
Yeah, so just to clarify, I absolutely would probably spend more than a day preparing for an audition. Just on the day of the audition, I try and make sure I'm either working on something else or doing something else that means that the whole focus of the day isn't on that 10 minutes, because I think it can make it bigger than it is.
Yeah.
But in terms of preparation, I mean, some of this might be a given, but like read absolutely everything that you're given. That will vary from, you know, if you're auditioning for a play, like odds on you're going to get the whole play. Read the play. I've been a reader in auditions where people have come in and they haven't read the play, and like it's read the play. Read everything you're given. When it comes to a screen audition, you might just get sides. You might get sides and a synopsis. You might get sides and a full episode or the full script of the film. Anything that you're given, read. It's not to say that you'll be discussing it in the audition. Oftentimes in a screen audition, you'll just go in and do your thing, and that'll be the end of it. But what it'll give you is a rooting in the character and a rooting in the world that you're trying to inhabit. And that can be the difference between you giving a great read and a read that's for a completely different film. Difference between stage and screen auditions. I remember auditioning for Little Women in the Gate a few months after I graduated from drama school. And the sides were like 12 pages long. And one of them was like a 2-page monologue. And I learned it all off by heart. I was in that room for about 7 minutes. Like it broke. And I put the script under my seat and I was like, look it. And I didn't get the job. So I think it's super important to be off book for a screen audition, because if you're looking at a camera and your head's like this, it's no use. Oftentimes that would be specifically requested of you to be off book for a screen audition, but for the most part, you'll have a lot less to learn as well. When it comes to a stage audition, absolutely read the play, absolutely read the scenes again and again and again, and be super familiar with them. You might be as good as off book, but there's something about not having it in your hand that can unsettle, especially if you're nervous, or if it's a big audition, or if it's somebody you haven't met before. You could be totally off book, but have it in your hand, because it's not going to make a difference when you get in the part and not, and it might make the difference between you needing to look down for it and not. Whereas if you don't have it in your hand and you just go blank, then you have to fooster and you have to find it, and you're just going to unsettle yourself. And basically do everything, and all the preparation you do for auditions is just for yourself. It's to give yourself the best possible chance of doing yourself justice in the room. So whatever it is so whether you're a quick learner and you can do that in one solid day's work, great. Sometimes you'll get like a week to prepare for an audition, and that actually kind of stresses me out, because it can feel like you should be spending that entire week working on that thing. That mightn't be the best thing either. Oftentimes, particularly with screens, I always feel like your initial gut response to a scene, your gut instinct of what it should be what you go with, because that would be the most true, the most real, and the most natural when you go to perform it in the room. So basically, there's no time frame you can really put on prep. It's until you feel 100% comfortable with the material, and be on time.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you very much, Matthew. All right, we have some more hands popping up in the chat. I see a Jessica Barrett. Jessica, do you want to stick on your camera and your microphone and ask your question?
Hiya.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi. Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate the talk and your honesty throughout this whole thing.
Not honest.
I think one thing that I just want to ask is how you mentioned when you were going for meeting people for coffee and kind of making connections like that. Kind of what would you say is the way of going about that? Like, would you email, or is like their social media accounts maybe too personal? What's kind of like a good way to start making those connections? Or off, I don't know.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I've been contacted by email or on Twitter or wherever I'm accessible to people, which is completely fine. What I would say about it is make sure that when you're meeting somebody that you have a specific thing that you want to talk about, or specific questions you want to ask, or a specific kind of whether it's I don't know, advice on agents or whatever it is. I know when I get asked to meet somebody, I always get a bit anxious about it, because I don't feel qualified to give advice, despite me just talking the heads off you for like an hour and a half.
No, it's very good.
So make sure that you have a really specific reason why you want to meet that person, in particular. Like, I'm not saying that you have to have seen all their work or anything like that, but it does help if you know, because if you know exactly what it is that you want from them, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
Because otherwise it can feel like
respect their time.
Totally respect their time, 100%. Yeah. But it can also feel like there's no one path in this industry. Like, I graduated 9 years ago, and there's maybe 7 of us still working, and we've all had completely different career paths. There's no right way of doing anything in this industry. And if your question is like, help me, how do I get a job? Then I'm not going to be able to answer it, basically, because I don't know. But if you have really specific queries or worries and things, that can really help form a conversation. Like what Tanya did here today. If Tanya said to me, can you talk to my students for an hour? I would have been like, no. About what? What, like, but because she had specific questions that sent me off on my tangent, I was flying. So that's the only, I would absolutely, like, Twitter, email, whatever way you have access to them, and explain who you are and say that you would love to talk to them about this kind of specific thing. I think that's probably the best way to go about it. And like, I've yet to be told no when I've asked politely and kindly.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great question. We actually had in the first panel that we did for these with Ronan Phelan, Keira Elizabeth Smith and Claire Barrett, the same kind of question of what's horribly called the informational coffee, which is essentially like asking somebody for coffee and chats, came up.
Yeah.
And Roland made the very good point. He said, like, if somebody emails me saying, hi, I'm interested in directing, can I talk to you? And at the coffee, it's very clear they've emailed every director they could figure out the email address for to ask the same question and aren't specific to me, then it's not a good use of my time. And that affects how you perceive that person on the first impression. And he said, but if you've seen some of my work and contact me saying, I saw this, I really enjoyed this, I'm interested in directing, I'd love to talk to you, then that's a conversation, as opposed to it's somebody saying, I want to date you, as opposed to honestly anybody.
100%. And it's not about fangirling, or it's not about artists needing you to like reinforce their sense of self, which they probably do as well. But it's more about being specific about why you want to meet that person in particular, as opposed, like when I left drama school, I probably emailed every director in the country. I didn't hear back from like any of them, but because they knew I was emailing every director in the country. Whereas like I've gotten more, I would still send emails to people who I like, who I really, really want to work with. But now it's apparent that I really, really want to work with, specifically because of the kind of work that they make. And then I always get a response to that. Doesn't mean they're going to put you in a show immediately, but it means that you're lodging yourself in their brain for the right reasons, and not just as a copy and paste kind of a job.
Totally. No, I think that's a good advice. I'd like to be more hands metaphorically popping up. Sean McManus, do you want to stick on your camera if you want to and ask your question?
Hello, hi.
Hi, Sean.
Thanks both of you so much, and I've loved your tangents, so keep them coming.
Okay.
Well, I was going to ask, because I also write and act, and I find it hard to balance both. Particularly, like it's kind of like, personally, I love the practical stuff, but then when it comes to like editing, or if it comes to like applying for grants and stuff, that's kind of like the taxing bit or whatever. So I kind of wanted to ask a little bit for advice about how to structure your day, or do you have a structure that enables you to like tick each of the boxes?
I did exactly what you are doing right now when I started writing, and I asked every writer I knew, and particularly I didn't have a process of writing. Like Charlie kind of came out of me naturally, almost by accident. It felt like a very instinctive way of writing. And then when I went to write play number 2, I was like, I don't even know where to begin. So I started asking writers I know about their processes and trying to rob them like entirely and put them in my own life, which absolutely didn't work. However, I did rob bits and pieces from other people. So in terms of a structure on a day, a lot of what writing is for me is reading. So when I get like a wave of writing, I will write a lot really quickly in the space of like an hour. But I'll probably have done 3 or 4 hours of reading / watching YouTube videos before that. That's not to say that is good. It just means that I'm at my desk at 10 a.m. and I'm sitting down in front of the laptop. And sometimes actually applications can be a good procrastination tool, because if you hit a wall with your play and you know you want to sit at the desk for the day and do a decent day's work, then you can segue off and apply for some funding. And it's using a different part of your brain, but you still feel like you've achieved something in the day, and it doesn't feel like the day was a waste. I like to be at my desk for like decent amounts of time to assuage any guilt of procrastinating, basically. So I can find something to do. If I hit a wall with writing, I'll find something else to do that is not a total waste of time. And when it comes, I totally get where you're coming from in terms of applications and that kind of side of things. It is crap. It is a given, and it's a necessary evil. And like a lot of artists will struggle with applications and things, because it can be difficult to formulate your ideas in an articulate way if your brain is wired a bit more artistically. Just keep doing them, because you're going to have to get good at them. Like there's nothing else. There are going to be aspects of your job that you're not going to love, but they are going to be a necessary evil. And then it just means as well that when you go back to doing the actual creative part of it, you'll be delighted and you'll be dying to get back to it just to get away from the application. I don't know if that answers your question, but basically you have to get good at them. You have to figure out a way of, like, there's no like, no one you can pay to do them for you. Well, there probably is, but you won't be able to afford that, so you're going to have to get good at them yourself. Yeah, and it is like, but there certainly are support networks in place, like the Irish Theatre Institute. Like they've read nearly every application that I've ever done. And again, it's like about developing relationships with these people who you can bounce things off, or like all your colleagues, all your classmates. They're the kind of people that you're going to rely on so heavily for this stuff, for support, both moral and applicational. They're going to have to read your stuff. They're going to have to, you're going to support each other in different ways, and that's going to be one of them for sure. Does that help?
Yeah, like, I mean, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Basically, you're just going to have to work really, really, really hard all the time.
Oh, great.
Like I know, and that's it. Like, and I think like when I was drama school and I was meeting people and asking them questions and stuff, what I really wanted was them to tell me like how to be a success, and the only, like, no one can tell you that. All you can do is work really, 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 really hard all the time.
Savage. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your question, Sean. I've popped Irish Theatre Institute's website address into the chat. As
Amazing.
Claire says, they're fantastic. I think it's like the 7th time they've been mentioned in these seminars. They're fantastic for just supports on producing, answering questions about the industry, and particularly in terms of grant writing. They are magical.
Yes.
All right, the next hand up is Edwina. Edwina, do you want to stick your camera on and your microphone and ask your question, or type it in the chat, whatever works for you?
Hello there. I just want to say thanks a million. Really informative. And also to Tanya as well. The series has been really good. These might seem like kind of strange questions, and I don't mean them in a personal way, but I'll ask them, and you can feel free to decline to answer. The first one, you mentioned just when you're waiting to go on set that there's quite a lot of time, say when after the dress rehearsal, not the dress rehearsal, when you're in costume, and just kind of what type of things would you do? Would you go over lines then, or would you do something completely different? And the second question then was, are there ever any challenging times when you're working with somebody who's so close in your personal life, kind of affect your work? And how do you keep things kind of in both areas running smoothly? And I mean, sorry, I don't mean that personally, as in if there's some way to answer those questions in a general way, if that makes sense.
Well, when it comes to being on set, I used to do a lot of napping, because those days are long, and like you're oftentimes you're getting up at 5 a.m. and you won't be home till 11 or 12 at night. They're long, long days. And so any opportunity you get to rest is always worthwhile. Always bring a book to set. Read loads of books. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, every morning on set you'll get handed your sides for whatever is shooting that day, and they'll be with you all the time. Your pocket or whatever. And yeah, I mean, like, you absolutely need to be 100% all over that stuff, because that's what's expected of you. And when you get to set, you need to be able to do it, boom, get it right, and be done. So that's the number one thing. I mean, like, you'll have known from weeks in advance what you're doing on every day, because you have a schedule. So that's obviously work that you'll have done in advance. But certainly, I mean, don't kill yourself drilling them. Once you know them, you know them. But yeah, sleeping, reading, having the crack. Sets are really, really good fun. Always let an AD know where you're going, though. Don't wander off randomly and not be in your trailer or your dressing room, because you'll get in trouble for that. And your next question. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it can be challenging working with somebody that you are so personally connected with. However, for me anyway, certainly the pros have outweighed the cons in a big way. We have a shorthand. We have we can be painfully honest with one another at all times. And I also, the most important pro for me is that I've never doubted for one moment that he was as committed to and dedicated to the work being as good as it could possibly be as I am. And I can't think of another director that you know, not that there wouldn't be, but I know he's never going to slack off. He's never going to allow me out there doing work that isn't up to standard. And yeah, I mean, when we rehearsed Charlie's Klepto, obviously it was only myself and himself in the room. And so we probably had a way of working that mightn't have been conducive to there being other people in the room. I remember our lighting designer, Susie, sitting in the auditorium one day when we were having what I thought was a fairly calm discussion. And I looked up and she was like this. She was like, Mommy and Daddy are fighting. So then when we moved on to doing Minefield, my second play, it was a three-hander. And so obviously we had to be in a room with a stage manager and the two other actors. And we had to kind of modulate our speech a little bit. We had to, I suppose, there's a different, we couldn't be as painfully honest with each other as we would have been in a room on our own, I suppose, because you have to be respectful of your the rest of your ensemble who are coming in to work with you. But no, to be honest, because we're both actors, because we both work so much, we're apart an awful lot. Like, he tours a lot, I tour a bit. So getting to work together is kind of a joy. It's not that we haven't come to blows, we absolutely have. But yeah, like I said, the pros have massively outweighed the cons.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Edwina. All right, the next person with their hand patiently, metaphorically up is Sarah Louise Conahan. Sarah Louise, do you want to stick on your camera and unmute yourself?
Hi, how are you doing?
Hi.
Sorry, I'm very bright there. My original question was very similar to about the funding and what, like, you know, about how did you adapt things for funding, but you've kind of answered that already. But another thing is you're probably the first person that I know that has a very similar kind of career line as myself in terms of I do a lot of acting, but I do a lot of circus as well, and I'm trying to do a lot of writing now too. It's kind of a thing that I've been developing recently, and it's trying to find where do you find that it's difficult to explain? Whenever somebody asks me what I do, I kind of go, ugh, and it depends on where I am that day. Like, do you find it very difficult to put yourself into, I know that labels aren't a thing now, but I find that whenever I say I'm a performer, it kind of throws me off from the scent from people talking to me about another thing. Or if I say that I'm a writer, then my performance thing comes into question. How do you handle that? Or did you just
I think definitely there can be a sense in a small industry like, it's kind of double-edged sword. In a small industry like Ireland, it's almost a necessity to diversify in some way, because, you know, there's only so much work for everybody, and there's so many talented performers and everything. So a lot of performers I know, super talented people, have diversified either into writing or into filmmaking or into various things. No one I know works in circus, though. That's amazing. So it's almost a necessity now to diversify in some way. But at the same time, people like to have you in a box, and they get a little bit confused if you mess with the box system. So I suppose when it comes to applying for things and dealing with things job-wise, professional-wise, I would be savvy about, I have different biogs, for instance.
Yeah.
So I have a biog for when I'm applying for something as a writer. I have a biog for when I'm applying for something as an actor. You do have to be smart about how you position yourself, because much and all as I know I can do two things equally well, not everyone else is going to be of that opinion, particularly if they can only do one thing well, because then they're just going to be annoyed. Yeah, you do have to be savvy about how you position yourself in particular situations. But at the same time, for the most part, everybody who works in the industry knows that there is, like I said, almost a necessity to diversify. So it depends on who you are that day. It depends on what your end game is with that person, or if you want. I mean, if I met a director, I'm going to be telling them that I'm an actor and a writer. And if I meet like a production company, I'm going to say that I'm a writer and an actor. You know, so I suppose you can work it to suit you and for your end, whatever it is that you're after that particular day. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I suppose it's just kind of.
Or just say you're a plumber. If it's tax, just say you're a plumber and just don't talk about it at all.
Sometimes I can comment it. No, I think it's just kind of knowing where to put yourself, because you know it's the thing about going for the coffee. Sometimes you don't always get the coffee. You just have time to kind of introduce yourself whenever you're, because also work in front of house or something, whatever else it is that you're doing. And then when it comes to the writing, because I write one woman shows and things like that. It kind of sometimes feels like you're kind of going, I'll do whatever you want, and I will, but I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Louise. That's a brilliant question. All right, we have a couple other people waiting. We should just be able to fit everyone in. All right, next up we have one of our second year students, recently returned from Chicago, Owen McAdam. If you want to stick your camera on and ask a question.
Hi, just sort of have a question about like what you were talking about with applying for bursaries and things to get a play from its feet, get a play off its feet. Never mind. Sometimes I kind of feel like, because I also like to write and things, being on the outside looking in, there can be kind of a disconnect from something you write and something on a stage. And I'm just wondering, is it just kind of the bursary route and trying to find producers that is the route from getting something that you've written onto a professional stage for people to see it, or are there loads of different avenues that can be taken and it's just a matter of finding one of them that works?
Yeah, totally. Like I said, like everything in this industry, there's no one clear path to anything really, but there are certainly options. So it depends on if, like, there's a lot of open calls for plays across Ireland and particularly the UK. So like say Druid will have an open submissions policy, the Abbey will have an open submissions policy, the Lyric will have an open submissions policy, and an awful lot of theatres in the UK will have the same. So that's if you're, so to my mind, that's if you're a straight up writer who has a play that you would like to hand over to a professional company for them to make. And again, you'll be one of hundreds, thousands in the mix, I suppose. It's not to say that you won't get feed. You know, sometimes most theatres will commit to reading every play they receive, but they can't commit to feedback on every play they receive because they receive so many. If the theatre is interested in your play, then they'll contact you back and there'll be a feedback situation then. I suppose the way I came at it, because I wanted to be in the work that I was writing, and that was a very important part of what I was doing, I felt like I had to be more proactive about it. I also just know how rare it is for a play to land on a desk and then get to production just from the open submission policy. It's not to say that it doesn't happen, but I just didn't have the time to wait for that to happen, basically. So yeah, you're either going to be like a solitary writer who sends their plays off into the world and hopes for the best, which is totally valid. Or if you want to be more proactive about it, then you have to look at ways of getting your plays made at the level that you are currently at, whether that's with your peers and your collaborators that you, like I can't believe I haven't mentioned yet, I kind of did vaguely. Smock Ally's Seen and Heard Festival in Smock Alley is one of the most incredible platforms for new work that the country has. Like you can look at the Dublin Fringe Festival and think that that's like an entry-level place to be. It's just not. The Fringe Festival is so big and ambitious, and like I was working for 8 years before I got a play into the Fringe Festival. It's kind of, it's not to say that you, again, 100% apply, because they're so brilliant at supporting artists. But if you want to come at it from the perspective of making some work yourself, to get like to just see your work on a stage or to hear it with an audience, and that's so important, then something like the Seen and Heard Festival is definitely a place to be, because it's a really broad range of artists with work that's at all kinds of levels of development, and it gets an audience, and people from the industry go and see it. And so many plays have gone from the Seen and Heard Festival into the Fringe Festival. And they will help you out with all the really tough things, like they give you a venue, they give you a tech person. The fact that you're in the program is marketing in itself. It's kind of a no-brainer for somebody starting now, I would say. And it's where Charlie began. And it's where my voice as a writer first got a stage to be on, and it was completely invaluable. So like I said, there are various different paths, and it depends on what it is you want to get out of it, I suppose.
Thank you.
That helps?
Thank you so much, Owen. I've popped the website for Seen and Heard into the chat, so that's there as well.
Amazing.
Okay, we have another hand up. Colin, if you want to stick on your camera and your microphone and ask your question, or stick it in the chat.
Hi, Claire. Just wanted to say again, like everybody else is saying, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. Really enjoyed the chat. My question is, so just to say that, like, to be able to write your own one-woman show and, you know, bring it from just writing it, and to not only do that, but then performing it, that's, you know, a really impressive thing. And I just want to say well done for doing that. And in that kind of process, and, you know, taking it and performing your own writing as well, how did that compare to just acting and, like, you know, acting for someone else's writing to going and acting for your own piece of writing? And what did you learn from that process?
Yeah, it's completely terrifying. Like, like on a regular preview of a show that I'm in that I haven't written, I will be a walking mess before it. I get desperate nerves, and then a week into the run they'll be gone. But when it's a play that you've written yourself, it's that times 1,000. But at the same time, it's such an incredible opportunity to give yourself a part that nobody else will give you. When I came out of drama school, I just was repeatedly being cast as somebody from the country, which is completely fine. I give good country. But I'm a dub, and nobody will cast me as a dub. And that was part of my impetus in writing Charlie, was like, I really want to play this, you know, this really through and through Dublin character. And at that point, nobody was giving me that opportunity. So I learned so much from giving myself that challenge. And I didn't make it easy for myself. It's a hard play to perform. But it's such a gift to have the opportunity to, because we'll all play parts in our careers that aren't great. Like, I don't know how many horror number 2s I've auditioned for. Like, it's the thing. So I've also played amazing parts, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But to have the opportunity to give yourself that brilliant of a part, God, I'm blowing smoke up myself now, but yeah, I learned so much. And also it made me feel, I remember performing it in the Civic in Tala at the beginning of the tour last year, and my good pal Mags McAuliffe, who's also an actor and a writer, came to see it, and she had her show, The Humours of Bandon, it's a fish Abba play that's travelled the world. She's performed it like 150 times or something crazy like that. And I spoke to her afterwards, and she was like, "You're invincible now." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "If you can perform your own one-person play that you wrote on your own, 75 minutes on your own, then you can do anything." And I kind of do feel like that now. I do feel like I don't know if there'll be anything presented to me now that'll be as challenging as that. So it just makes you super, super brave, I think.
Definitely. Thank you very much again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Pleasure. Thanks, Colin.
Thank you very much, Colin. All right, I think we have come to the end of our time. Claire, thank you so much for your time, for talking about us so honestly about your career and about the different facets. One of the lovely things about these webinars has been that the tenor has been very much kind of positive yet realistic, and it's It's really appreciated. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. Thanks. And guys, like, best of luck graduating them in your future careers. I'm sure our paths will cross. It's a small town. And make sure to say hello if we do.
One thing we do for each of these webinars, because it's difficult on a webinar to show appreciation, we ask people to show their appreciation for our speakers by sticking on their cameras. See, they're old hands at this point. So people want to stick on their cameras, and we're going to give a round of applause in Irish Sign Language. Claire, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so starved of it.
And that is a wrap on the Career Stages webinars. Thank you to all our amazing speakers, and thank you to everyone who joined us. We saw a lot of the same names popping up each week, and it was wonderful. Thank you for your great questions. Thank you for your time. It's been wonderful to have these conversations about the industry. That is us.
And well done, Tanya, on what sounds like an incredible series of talks. We get a little hand for Tanya.
That is so lovely. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for being.
All right, people, stay safe, wash your hands, have a wonderful summer, and I look forward to seeing some of you in a classroom and many of you in an audience and some of you on a stage. Thanks so much, guys.